Good afternoon, guys. We are starting chapter 10, skeletal muscle tissues, and we will spend most of our time on skeletal muscle tissue. So today we will go over an overview of the muscle tissue, types and functional feature of the muscles. Then we will focus mainly on skeletal muscles. In the skeletal muscle, gross and microscopic structure, we will go over connective tissue sheath in skeletal muscles. Skeletal muscles are very thin muscles and it is delicate structure. So to protect them, we have several layer of connective tissue covering them. So we're going to talk about the connective tissue sheath in a skeletal muscle. After that, we will go over microscopic and functional anatomy. In microscopic anatomy, we will talk about the skeletal muscle tissue as a whole, and then skeletal muscle cell or muscle fiber. And then inside the muscle cell, there is ultra-structural organization, which explain the functional anatomy of the muscle cells. We're going to talk about that. Then skeletal muscle contract under the influence of motor neuron. And the motor neuron and all the muscle fibers which innervated by that particular motor neuron is called motor unit. So we'll talk about how a motor neuron control the activity of certain muscle fibers. And then we'll compare skeletal, cardiac, and smooth muscles, and we will find out similarities and dissimilarities among them. So let's start with the overview of the muscles. Muscle is a Latin word which means little mouse. And little mouse is like if you put a mouse, a rat under the blanket, and when mouse runs, how you see from the top, exactly muscle is under the skin. Skeletal muscles makes up nearly half of body mass. That means if you have 160-pound weight, then almost 80 pounds will be the muscle. Muscle is the primary tissue also in the other part of the body, but those muscles are not skeletal muscles. They are cardiac muscle tissue in the heart, smooth muscle tissue in the wall of hollow organs, in the wall of tubular organs like GI tract, urinary tract, reproductive tracts. In the heart, cardiac muscle is found particularly in the wall of ventricles and wall of atria. Overview of muscle tissue means what are the main function of muscle tissue. The first function of the muscle tissue is movement. So skeletal muscle is attached to skeleton or bones, which when contracts moves body by moving the bones. So let's see, we have a biceps muscle in our hand and this muscle cross the joint. So biceps muscle cross the shoulder joint and the elbow joint. So when this muscle contract, it can move the elbow joint. And when it moves, contracts, we perform the function of our hand with the movement of hand. So moving the body is the function of skeletal muscle. Skeletal muscle, smooth muscle also moves, but it moves the content in the hollow organ. For example, they squeeze fluid and other substances through the hollow organ. So when you eat a food that pass into your esophagus, from the esophagus into your stomach and down in the intestine due to contraction of the smooth muscle, okay? when egg is released on 14th day of menstruation cycle. Due to the contraction of the fallopian tube, it is taken inside the fallopian tube and then moves towards the uterus. Okay. Similarly, all like when your bladder contract is squeeze urine outside the urinary bladder. Okay. Cardiac muscle pumps blood throughout the body because it contract the wall of atria and ventricles. Skeletal muscles maintain postures of your body, and that's why it enables the body to remain sitting or standing. When you are sitting now, your muscles are contracted, and that's why maintaining your posture. You are not contracting all the muscles. Some of the muscles are involuntary contracted now. Joint stabilization. If there is no muscle, joints will be floppy. Due to the muscles crossing the joint and covered by other connective tissue, joints are stabilized by the skeletal muscle. Uh, Muscle contracts, and when it contracts, it uses ATP and breaks down ATP. Some of the energy from the ATP breakdown is used as the source of muscle contraction, and some of the energy lost in the form of heat, and that increase the body temperature. So muscle contraction produce heat and maintains your normal body temperature. Functional feature of the muscles. There are 4 functional features of the muscles. Contractility. So muscle cells are called muscle fiber. Muscle cells are long, and that's why they are called muscle fiber, because they are thin and long. So these long muscle cells, muscle fiber, shorten and generate pulling force. They have property of contractility. Other cells do not have that property. For example, a bone cell. For example, an epithelial cell or fat cell, they don't have pulling force capacity. Okay. Excitability. The electrical impulse from the motor neuron stimulates the muscle cell to contract. That means muscle cell also can generate and transmit electrical impulse. That is the excitability property of muscle cells. Extensibility. Muscle cells can be stretched back to its original length by contraction of opposing muscles. So let's see when you contract your biceps muscle. Now the opposing muscle, triceps, contract and brings it back to the normal anatomical position, to its original length. Whereas elasticity is passive stretching back. So let's say you have a muscle contraction and then muscle relax itself. Once it relax, it comes to original size without any action of other muscles, which happens passively, and that is called elasticity. So extensibility is active process with the action of opposing muscle, whereas elasticity is passive process due to relaxation of muscles, where it brings the muscle fiber to the original length. Okay, so types of muscle tissue. There are 3 major types of muscle tissue. We talked about them earlier. Skeletal muscle tissue are attached to your skeleton, to your bones. They are packaged into skeletal muscles, and we have several skeletal muscles in our body. For example, biceps, triceps, brachioradialis, pronator teres, rectus femoris, semitendinosus, semimembranosus. You're going to see these all muscles. These muscles are organs. Each muscle in your body is an organ because they are made up of several muscle cells, several connective tissue, nerves, blood vessels. Makes up 40% of your body weight, almost 50 to 40%. And the skeletal muscle cells are striated, means they have stripes when you see under microscope. There is dark band and there is light band. Skeletal muscle cells are also called voluntary muscles because you can contract when you, so you can call skeletal muscle is also called voluntary muscles. Okay. You can contract whenever you want. Cardiac muscles occurs only in the walls of the heart, particularly in the wall of atria and ventricle. And this muscle is the middle wall of atria and ventricles. Okay. Outer wall of the atria and ventricle is connective tissue. Inner wall is epithelial tissue and middle wall is cardiac muscle. Cardiac muscle contract and squeeze blood from the atria and ventricle all over the body. Cardiac muscle is also called striated muscle, but they are called involuntary muscle. Striated because they have stripes like skeletal muscle, and involuntary because they are not under your control. So they are similar to smooth muscle tissue in involuntary wise. Okay. Smooth muscle tissue occupies the walls of hollow organs. For example, walls of GI tract wall, walls of the urinary tract, walls of the reproductive tract, walls of the respiratory tract. In those walls, you have smooth muscles. Smooth muscles lack striations. They look smooth under microscope. That's why we call them smooth. But they are involuntary. So both cardiac and smooth muscles are controlled by autonomic nervous system. So cardiac and smooth muscles are controlled by autonomic nervous system. Which is sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Okay. So some similarities of muscle tissues, all the muscle tissues. Cells of the muscles are known as fibers because they are long, thin. Muscle contraction depends on two types of myofilaments. Okay, so whether it is skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle, or smooth muscle, their cells contains most of their organelle filled with only one organelle, and that is called myofibrils. So myofibril fill up the muscle cells, and myofibrils are made up of two myofilaments, which is called contractile proteins. One type contains actin protein, another type contains myosin proteins. That's why we call them as a whole actin and myosin proteins. These two proteins slide with each other during muscle contraction and generate contractile force, which decrease the length of muscle during contraction, and when it relaxes, comes back to normal. A plasma membrane of the muscle cell is called sarcolemma, and cytoplasm of the muscle cell is called sarcoplasm. The smooth endoplasmic reticulum of the muscle cell is called sarcoplasmic reticulum. You can see in my note. Okay. So muscle cell has their own specific names. Number one, muscle cell is called muscle fiber. Outer membrane of the muscle cell is called sarcolemma. Inside the muscle cell, you have cytoplasm that is called sarcoplasm. You have smooth endoplasmic reticulum that is called sarcoplasmic reticulum, and a smooth endoplasmic reticulum, which is sarcoplasmic reticulum, inside the muscle cell has one special function. And by the way, some of you tell me, what is that a special function?
Is it that it stores calcium or?
Good. It stores calcium, which is essential for muscle contraction. Okay. So these are the features or similarities among all the muscle types, cells. Skeletal muscle, each muscle is an organ, as I said earlier, consists mostly of muscle tissue, but it also contains other tissues like connective tissue. All the covering of the muscles you will see in several layers, outer layer, middle layer, inner layer in the muscles. They all are connective tissue. Muscle also contains blood vessels to supply oxygen and nutrition and get rid of waste product. And blood vessel itself contains several kind of tissue. Nerves tissue is also in the muscle because nervous tissue controls it. And that's why each and every muscle in the body is an organ. Like biceps is one organ, whereas triceps is another organ. Brachioradialis here is another organ. This muscle in the hand, this thenar, this is called thenar muscle. This is called hypothenar muscle. These muscles are also organs, okay? So before I show you another slide, I want you to see the hierarchy of skeletal muscle. So let's see if I take a biceps muscle and I cut it, expose it. When I slice an organ of muscle, like a biceps muscle, what are we gonna open? So let's see triceps, I'm giving here an example. See if I slice a triceps muscle, then I'm gonna expose fascicles. In singular, fascicles are called fasciculus. When I cut this fascicle, then fascicle will release muscle cells. And if I cut muscle cell covering, which is muscle fiber, then inside the muscle cell, you will see packet of bundles of myofibrils. And inside the myofibril, if you put even more powerful microscope, then you're gonna see small protein molecules of actin and myosin. Okay, so we're gonna go over detail. What are the covering of the muscles, and what is the ultra microscopic structure inside the cell? Here you go. If you have done physiology with me, you have seen this, and it is easier for you guys. If you have not done, I want you to look here 1 minute. Okay, so this is an organ of muscle, whole muscle. Muscle is attached to bones, and this is cut section. So another end of the muscle will also be attached to another bone. Muscle never attaches both ends to the same bones. No. Okay. So muscle attachment, the proximal attachment of a skeletal muscle is usually origin of the muscle. And distal attachment of the muscle is usually insertion. When muscle contracts, the insertion is pulled towards the origin of the muscle. And that's how you decrease the length of the muscle during muscle contraction. Muscle is attached to bone, not directly through the fibers, indirectly through the bundle of connective tissue, and that is called tendon. And if this tendon is fanned and attached to bone in a wide radiated way, in a fanned way, spread way, then we call them aponeurosis. So tendon and aponeurosis are both attaching the muscles to the bones. The difference is only tendon is converged, whereas aponeurosis is diverged. Okay. So let's talk about this muscle here and the connective tissue covering. Connective tissue sits in a skeletal muscle. So when I slice this muscle, first muscle is covered by skin, then you have under the skin, you have superficial fossa, deep fossa, and then you have other connective tissue. So remove the skin, remove the superficial fossa, remove the deep fossa, and then you see the connective tissue covering of whole muscles. So the outermost covering of connective tissue is epimysium. See, this color is slightly misnomer. It should be white. Okay. So this is epimysium, which covers whole muscle, which is the outermost covering of a muscle. Inside the epimysium, you can see there is bundle of muscle fibers, several bundles. And then in between these bundles, you see there is veins, artery, nerves. See, blood vessels, nerves, and artery. Now inside the epimysium, there is bundle. You see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, around 7 or 8 bundles. Each bundle is called fascicle. Okay. And fascicle is also covered by another connective tissue. You see, white tissue around it. That white tissue around here, that white tissue is called perimysium. Same tissue is on here too, perimysium. See? So this is cut section and you see from the outside, perimysium. Now fascicle contains several muscle cells. See, these all pink sections are the section of muscle cells. If you see in detail, each muscle cells are also covered by white connective tissue, which is thinner than the peri and epimysium. That is called endomysium. And if I remove endomysium, then I can see plasma membrane of the muscle cell, and that is called
Sarcolemma?
sarcolemma. Yes, that's called sarcolemma. Okay. So follow me. Each muscle fiber is covered by endomysium, true or false?
True.
Each muscle is covered by perimysium.
True.
Or true.
False. Each whole muscle is covered by
False.
epimysium.
Epimysium.
If fascicle is covered by perimysium.
Perimysium.
Okay.
Mhm.
And now if I cut plasma membrane here, then I'm going to see inside the cell structure. What I'm going to see if I cut this, we're going to see like bundle here. You can see you will see similar like fascicle like bundle inside the muscle cell. And those will be not the bundle of muscle cell, but they will be bundle of myofilaments, and that is called myofibril. Okay. So that is epimysium, perimysium, and endomysium. Okay, basic feature of skeletal muscles. Nerves and blood vessel. Each skeletal muscle supplied by a branch of at least one nerve, one artery, one or more veins. It has also nerve and blood vessels, nerves and vessel branch repeatedly. So let's see if I have a big artery, axillary artery come, axillary artery divide, becomes branch, again branch, and then it enters the biceps muscles or triceps muscles. Uh, Smallest nerve branches and serve individual muscle fibers. So each muscle, let's see here. So let's see if we have a muscle here and if we have a nerve here. Nerve. When action potential pass down here, here will be neurotransmitter released. And that binds with the muscle plasma membrane and activate the muscle cells. This junction is called neuromuscular junction. Okay. So each muscle cell in your body must be supplied by a neuron. Must be, otherwise it will not function. Okay. So smallest nerve branch serve individual muscle fiber, like this is individual muscle fiber. Neuromuscular junctions signal the muscle to contract. So this neuromuscular junction here, this junction signal this muscle fiber to contract. Okay. Neuromuscular junction is a type of synapse between the nerve ending and the muscle cell. Muscle attachment. Most skeletal muscle run from one bone to another. One bone will move, other bone remains fixed. So origin, less movable attachment, and insertion, more movable attachment. That means insertion, when muscle contracts, the point of insertion moves towards the origin. See here, this is the origin, this is the insertion, and when this muscle contracts, it reduces the angle of the joint, and that's why you see hand from here will move to here, and from this angle you have this angle, and that's how you move the muscle. Okay. Muscle attachments continued. Muscle attached to origin and insertion by connective tissue. There is fleshy attachment. In this case, muscle fibers are very near to the bone because the connective tissue fibers are very short. Indirect attachments are the connective tissue form a tendon or aponeurosis. And in this case, the muscle cells are slightly away from the bones. Okay. And you know what is tendon and aponeurosis. Tendon is when the connective tissue converges and attached to the bone, and aponeurosis is when it diverges and attached to the bones. So bone markings present where tendons meet the bones. So when these tendons attach to the bones from very intrauterine life, the baby contract their muscle all the time. When their baby is playing in the fetus, they are pulling the cartilage, muscle, bone, and slowly create the bone markings like tubercle, trochanter, and crest. Now the microscopic and functional anatomy of skeletal muscle tissues. So microscopic anatomy means we're going to go inside the muscle cell and see the detail of the muscles. Like any cells, muscle cells are also a cell. So what you expect in a muscle cell? In a muscle cell has plasma membrane, it has organelles, it has nucleus, it has cytoplasm, everything inside it. The only thing they are different from other cells. Okay. So skeletal muscle cells or fibers are long and cylindrical. They are huge cells. Their diameter is around 10 to 100 micrometer and length several centimeter to dozens of centimeter. So you see, thigh muscles are very long muscle cells. Sartorius muscles in the thigh are very big. Each cell formed by fusion of embryonic cells. So when muscles are developing, they develop from mesoderm of the fetal tissue, and they develop from mesenchymal cells. If you remember, more than one mesenchymal cells fuse together and become one cell in the intrauterine life. And that's why muscle cells are multinucleated. Okay? They have several nuclei. Muscle cells are packed with bundle of actin in myosins, which is called myofibrils. That's why there is no space for nuclei to live in the center of the cell. And that's why they are pushed towards the inner side of plasma membrane or sarcolemma. Therefore, nuclei are peripherally located. See here? This is a diagram of part of muscle fiber. And you can see the section. Sarcolemma, mitochondria, several mitochondria, nuclei, you see, 3 nuclei. And when you see under microscope, you see dark band and whitish light band. Dark band is also called A band. Light band is also called I band. And to remember, in the dark, you have A, so we call it A band. In the light, you have I, and this is I band. Light is light due to thin filament, which is called actin. And dark is dark because this area is covered by thick filament that is called myosin. Okay. So inside, you see the bundle of actin and myosin. These are the myofibril. Let me ask one person here now. Anthony? Hey, Anthony. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Professor.
Okay. So this is a diagram of part of a muscle fiber. Yes?
Yeah.
This is the sarcolemma. You can get the help of your note or if you have PowerPoint in front of you. This is the sarcoplasma. Immediately after the sarcoplasma, there will be another connective tissue, which will be covering the muscle cells. What is that connective tissue called? Layer of connective tissue.
I am not sure, Professor.
You're not sure? Do you have PowerPoint in front of you?
Just what you're lecturing on right now.
Yeah, same PowerPoint. Oh, my PowerPoint only? You have not downloaded your own?
No.
Okay. So there are 3 connective tissue layer. Anybody else?
Is it
Is it the epimysium?
right?
Paramecium, right?
What is this?
It's a fascicle.
No, that's what I've.
That's the myofibril or the
No, you
Endomysium?
see here, this is a muscle fiber. Muscle fiber means
So it's
muscle cell.
epimysium.
So it's endomysium?
Look here, my God. I'm failing. In the whole muscle, you have bundle of muscle that is called fascicle. Inside the fascicle, you have group of muscle cell that is called muscle fiber. And this is a muscle fiber. And outer membrane of the muscle fiber is sarcolemma. So if I go and take this muscle cell in a whole muscle and then see what is covering outside this muscle immediately out after the sarcolemma, then what will be the connective tissue layer? Endomysium, epimysium, or perimysium?
Endomysium.
Endomysium.
It will be endomysium.
So the sarcolemma is right inside, like right after the endomysium.
Yes, because endomysium covers the muscle cell or muscle fiber. A slight twist. Makes you guys think differently. Okay, so you got it now, yes? Okay, so now myofibrils and sarcomeres. Striation result from internal structure of the myofibrils. And you know myofibrils are long rods within the cytoplasm, and those rods are bundle of actin and myosin. Make up 80% of cytoplasm. Can you believe? Like whole cytoplasm of the muscle cell is packed with myofibrils. Okay. They are a specialized contractile organelle found in the muscle tissue. So myofibrils are myofibril. Are organelle of the muscle cell. Okay. A long row of repeating segments called sarcomere, which is the functional unit of a skeletal muscle. I'm going to explain it in next slide. Without slide, you will not understand it. Okay, so let me go to diagram first, and then I will come back here. Okay, so this is part of a skeletal muscle cell or muscle fiber. Good. It's the same diagram I showed you earlier. Again, if I ask you here, which connective tissue layer will be around this sarcolemma?
endomysium.
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 Now we have remove the sarcolemma and then see some section of the muscle cell. There is hundreds of bundle. We are taking only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. bundles with some section of the plasma membrane. Can you see it? Okay, so as I said, all the organelles are inside the muscle cells. You see, there is nuclei, there is mitochondria, and then there is the most important 80% space containing organelle, which is myofibril. Okay, so each bundle is myofibril. This one you see, myofibril. Now, if I take out and clean up and see the myofibril, so here is one myofibril, yes? Myofibril is made up of actin and myosin. If you see the dark, thick filament in the center, that is myosin. Okay. Then you see the purple thin filament, which is attached to G disc, is called
Actin.
actin. So actin is attached to G disc on the both side of myosin, and some part of the actin is covering the myosin surface. Are you following me? This is the arrangement in the muscle, and such arrangement will be like in hundreds, thousands in number in each muscle cell. So like here will be one section of actin myosin, another section, another section, another section, like thousands of sections of actin and myosin arranged. Get that first. Close your eyes, imagine we have a muscle. Inside the muscle, we have a fascicle. Inside the fascicle, we have muscle cell. Inside the muscle cells, we have 80% packed myofibrils, and myofibrils are not like one unit. Myofibrils are section of actin myosin, section of actin myosin, and each section of actin and myosin unit is called sarcomere. Okay, get that first. So you see here, from this G disc to this G disc, this area is called sarcomere. From this G disc to another G disc here will be another sarcomere. From another G disc to another G disc here will be another sarcomere, and so on. Okay. Now, the anatomists, to make it easier to explain to others, they have given the name of these units. That's all it is. It's just naming. So this protein is called G disc, G protein, or G disc. The area between G disc to G disc is called sarcomere. And the length of whole length area covered only by myosin is called dark band or A band. The area covered only by thin filament is called I band. The area in the center of myosin, where there is no actin, and there is another protein anchoring all the myosin, which is called M protein, myosin anchoring protein. This small area is called H zone. Okay, so this is sarcomere from G disc to G disc, and sarcomere is the structural and functional unit of the skeletal muscles. Now let's talk about the other structure. So if this is the plasma membrane here, sarcolemma of the muscle cells. Sarcolemma invaginate and goes around each myofibril. And when this sarcolemma invaginates, this is called T-tubules of the skeletal muscle. T-tubules transmit electrical impulse from the plasma membrane to around the myofibril. Outside the T-tubules, you see there is this blue tubules of sarcoplasmic reticulum. These reticulums are smooth endoplasmic reticulum. And just near to the T-tubule, you have dilated part of sarcoplasmic reticulum, and they are called terminal cisternae of the sarcoplasmic reticulum. These terminal cisternae contains most of the calcium stored here, which is essential for muscle contraction. This 3A structure, 2 cisternae and a T-tubule together is called triad. Okay. So this is the structure of the myofibril. So now you have easy here. This is the one myofibril. And this is 3D structure. You can see this is cut in the area of both actin and myosin. So the big dot, red dot is myosin, and a small blue dots are actin. So you can see here sarcomere, G disc to G disc, and then I band, A band, all are here. So when muscle contracts, these G disc come closer, and sarcomere gets smaller. I band gets smaller, and H zone also gets smaller. So when muscle contracts, HIS, H zone, I band, and sarcomere contracts when muscle contracts. There is no decrease in length of actin or myosin filaments. Okay. This is sliding filament. So how muscle contracts? When muscle contracts, thick filaments and thin filaments slide with each other, where myosin head attached to actin in the thin filaments and then pivot to pull thin filaments inwards towards the center of the sarcomeres. So you see here, this is the thin filament, actin, and this is thick filament. Myosin head binds here, you see, and then pull towards the arrow, towards the center. So let's see, this is my G disc, this is my G disc, and then what happens? When they bind, they pull towards the center, okay, and decrease the length of the sarcomere. Here you can see this is A, B, and C. This is relaxed muscle. This is partially contracted muscle. This is completely contracted muscle. So you can see HIS, muscle contracts. When muscle contracts, His muscle contracts. You see here, I have written here. So only H zone, I band, and sarcomere contracts. So look here, H zone here. Look H zone here. Look I band here. This is the I band. Look I band here. Look I band here and H zone here. Look at the sarcomere length, G disc to G disc. This is the sarcomere length. So that's how muscle contract.
What does the S stand for again?
Which one?
In HIS, what does the S stand for again?
Sarcomere.
Thank you.
Sarcomere is the distance between G disc Okay, so here myosin in the sarcomere. Myosin is attached to G disc through a spring-like molecules, and that is called titin filaments. Titin filaments resist overstretching and hold thick filaments in place, and they unfold when muscle is straight. So a spring back when muscle comes to normal length, this spring works, and it also prevents from overstretching. Sarcoplasmic reticulum, we talked about it earlier. Okay. So here, this is the neuromuscular junction. A motor neuron, it's synapsing with the muscle cell plasma membrane. When axon potential comes here, they release a neurotransmitter in the synapse, which binds with the muscle cells and depolarize the muscle cells. That action potential pass through this T tubule around the myofibril, and then muscle contracts. How they do, that's the part of physiology. Motor unit here, innervation of a skeletal muscle. Skeletal muscles are innervated by the motor neuron. And you can see the motor unit 1, motor unit 2. So motor unit 1 is controlling 1, 2, 3 muscle fibers, whereas motor unit 2 is controlling, motor unit 1 is only
2 muscle fibers.
2 muscle fiber, and motor unit 2 is 3 muscle fibers. And under microscope, you're going to see this diagram. Comparison of skeleton and cardiac muscles. You know, cardiac muscle is here. The skeletal muscle is single, very long cylindrical multinucleate cells with very obvious striation we talked about. Whereas cardiac muscle is branched. You see, each cell is branched. And then each branch is connected to each other by a junction. You see the dark junction here, here. Those are called gap junction or intercalated disc. A smooth muscle is a spindle shape, like worm. And in the center, you have nuclei, and there is no striations. These two are called involuntary, and this is called voluntary. We talked about them. Where they are found, you already know. Some more features here. Connective tissue, you can see epimysium, perimysium, endomysium. There is only endomysium in the cardiac muscles. You will not see the peri or epimysium. Okay, in the smooth muscle, you will see only endomysium. Presence of tubules and site of invagination. You can see 2 in each sarcomere and A junction here. Larger diameter than those of the skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle, and there is no presence of T tubules. Rather, there is caveoli along the sarcolemma. This is the sarcoplasmic reticulum, very extensive in the skeletal muscle, less than a skeletal muscle. And then this is like equivalent to cardiac muscle in a smooth. Cells exhibit individual neuromuscular junction, not in single unit muscle, but in cardiac, you have no junction. You have autonomic neurons on the muscle cells. Source of calcium for calcium pulse, that is sarcoplasmic reticulum here in the skeletal muscle. And in cardiac, it is sarcoplasmic and from some extracellular calcium. Same thing in the smooth muscle too. This is the disease of the muscular system. I'm going to talk a little bit. This is interesting. So let me draw it. What happened? Okay. Muscular dystrophy is a group of inherited muscle disorders, and there is problem with one of the protein that is called dystrophin protein. Why I cannot find the okay. So let's say this is a muscle cell. Okay. And this is muscle cell, and then outside the cell there is extracellular space, and there is a protein under the muscle cell plasma membrane. This protein, this is called dystrophin protein. Dystrophin. This dystrophin holds plasma membrane to extracellular space here. Okay, which hold the plasma membrane of the muscle cell to outside, and this protein is called dystrophin. Okay, mutation of this dystrophin makes this muscle cell weaker, and that affect muscle enlarge with fat and connective tissue. Slowly muscle degenerate, and by the time of age of 20 years, the kid's gonna die due to failure of the atrophy of the muscle and paralysis of the respiratory muscles. Okay, there are two types of muscular dystrophy, that is called Duchenne's muscular dystrophy and myotonic muscular dystrophy. Okay, so this is X-linked recessive disorder.
Both of them, Professor?
Yeah. Okay, so I think that's all today.